Are you stuck with your AI transformation objectives? Whole range of use cases, but how do you then take action on those? I've been working with a couple of customers this week, and a couple of things repeated themselves as we explored what they're trying to do with their use cases that might be useful for you. So I've got 7 considerations for you to take away from this around, as you go through use case detail analysis, how do you refine down something tactical you can do as a very next step? Hi, my name is Peter Hayden, and I help organizations with data, analytics and AI, and start with the adoption journey and use of these investments in these technologies, particularly the Microsoft sphere, but these 7 considerations can be applied regardless of what technology vendor you use. So let's start with the first one, and where I think a lot of customers are getting to, or still have trouble refining. They've got lots of ideas, right, of what they could focus on, but what makes sense. Now, this is going to be a no-brainer, but I'm going to put in here priority and impact. So it's amazing how many organizations or people in organizations aren't able to understand or narrow down what a priority versus impact might be. For some, that's straightforward. For others, it's really challenging. Sometimes, until you go through a process like this, it's really hard to assess what the impact might be and how you prioritize that. This is a really simple way to do a first pass on a range of initiatives that will at least get you started. You can put this in, say, on a 2x2 grid and just start plotting those on. And it does require engaging with various stakeholders to be able to do that. But sometimes, which is the case of one of the customers, they had an area they already wanted to focus on because it was a big problem. So they knew they were going to have an impact, and they knew it was going to have there was a priority because there's some changes happening in their organization. So we've narrowed down already on a couple. For another organization I was talking to this week, we were exploring a range of different ones, but narrowed down based on what's going to have a big impact for their business, and therefore something they might be able to prioritize as we get to the detail. So a big part of use case exploration is understanding, well, what is it you're wanting to do? Not around solutioning, but understanding where are the opportunities inside of a particular use case. I think use case maybe like a process, right? Is one way to think about it, or brand new initiatives. And sometimes they're way too big, and we'll then break that down into subcomponents. You'll hear me use the word opportunities in this video. One of the things that a consideration is, what is the simplest way didn't spell it right, but simplest way to have the user interface. What's the way that people who are very part of a process, or maybe it's part of something that's automated, but what's the interface for that? And how do you keep that really simple and lightweight, especially if you're looking to get buy-in and just dip your toe in the water and take those first steps? So simple UI, something that's maybe already in use, say Microsoft Teams could be a way to do that, or maybe something that doesn't actually change the way people work. And this will touch on another point we'll have a bit later, but you want to minimize the effort you would need to then build into existing applications. And that's one way to, as you're narrowing down and how to get the ball rolling, is don't make it too complicated. Use something people are familiar with, whether it's an intranet, a simple web page, Teams, rather than trying to insert AI into something that might already be well established and mature inside your business. That can come later. But unless you've got a really clear ROI on that, I suggest you start with something simple. So the next one here is, I'll call it low friction. Now, this is for the end users, not for the implementation, but for the end user. So the people who will need to interface with this. All right. We don't want to be so disruptive with putting something out for a couple of reasons. One is you want people to see the benefit, and it's simple. It feels very easy, right? There's low friction. So that when there's any change in an organization with particular systems, and we've seen this, it's not just AI, this has been with technology for as long as I can remember, change needs to be well managed. So something that is low friction to the end user, that allows them to get a taste of it if they're not already using it. AI or aware of AI can be a good way to, it's well adopted. And secondly, people don't feel threatened by what is happening for a process. So hopefully, as you're assessing the components of your use case, you're looking for things that are probably low value for a person to do, but a machine could do with AI, right? To help provide people the ability to do higher value activities or more time to do other more productive things. The next one here is around, I talked about systems before in the UI, is I'm going to put down the integration. I had another word here, integration and dependencies. So if you're trying to show value to get broader buy-in as part of this journey, which is where a lot of businesses I think are in my conversations, this itself, integration in particular, can be a big challenge, right? To have to interface with these things, particularly if some systems don't have simple ways or APIs that exist. It's still surprising how many systems exist that don't have common APIs to interact with it. So think about where your data is as part of that an AI model would need to use as part of its grounding for that. And also consider dependencies. So if there is a dependency that this other thing exists to do something AI related but it doesn't, then that's probably not going to be a great place to start. So I wouldn't sort of consider things that have low number of dependencies and limited integration, or native integration, depending on what you're doing. So if you're doing something, say, with Microsoft Copilot, which can talk to things like M365, that might be really simple, right? If you're doing something in AI, Azure Foundry, that can talk to a SQL database, that might be low integration. Doing something that's in a hosted system that is behind a firewall and managed by someone else that is hard to get information out of, maybe not the best way to pick. And those exist, right? So we've got the priority impact, simple UI, low friction for end users, integration dependencies, finding ones that are simple to do and we can get across these hurdles pretty easily. Number 5 is simple to test. So how do you know if you're successful? How do you know if you're getting better? Does introducing AI for those end users something that you can measure really effectively? And that's just really to so you can show value at the end of the day. How do you know it's working well and people are using it? Maybe it's the quality. Maybe it's less time spent on something and more time on something else. Baseline what that looks like first, and then look at what it looks like after you've maybe put that in. But something that's really simple, observable to test, and it's not complex to do. All right, lots of caveats or conditions that might be there. And again, this is all about helping you getting the right groundswell to then build momentum, like the snowball getting bigger as you build momentum. Now, I talked about opportunities before, and this is where you probably can't get to this until you've thought about some of these items in terms of a broader business process or a broader use case. So the word I'm using at the moment, I don't know if it's the right word, is break a use case down into multiple opportunities for AI. That's been a really soft way to think about, right, here's something we do now with multiple people. Where's the opportunity to enhance that along the way? Now, I've the couple of business processes and use cases I've examined recently, I've got some that there is one opportunity or two opportunities. Some have 10, some have about 15. But as you go through this, there'll naturally be, hopefully, about 1 to 3 opportunities that you can use to narrow down. So you may have heard terms like niching down. In terms of getting specialised, and that's where you can get really good value. Very similar here, getting down into something more discrete, more atomic, rather than something too broad, will be very useful to then focus your efforts on. And then that shows value in making small step changes, but helping them make bigger changes across your organisation. One use case at the moment with a client where it affects 3 people, but that 3 people has a bigger impact for the rest of the organisation. So focusing on this is case I think of one opportunity that we would narrow down on quite quickly. It's one of the it was a very obvious one for this very limited use case. The same client had another use case where we explored about 10, and we're helping them guide them down to that top 3, so we can then do the next step to then say what do we actually do to get towards action, and this is looking for the effort in technology that you would need to achieve that, and ideally a minimal investment. So what I mean by that is that if you already have existing tools like Microsoft Copilot for 365 and access to Copilot Studio, that could be a really good way to do that. You already have an Azure tenancy where you may already, you can then spin up something Azure OpenAI or use Azure Foundry. It's a great example of things you already have access to fairly easily or lightweight. And that audience, we talked about, low friction. If it's say that 3-person example I gave you a moment ago, 2 of them of the 3 already have a Microsoft M365 Copilot license. So the tech investment is low, an extra license, and we can look at the effort. Right? If this one example is probably going to be a handful of days to help them put in place, run through some testing, and measure the value over a couple of week period. But if your effort to do a subcomponent is going to be several weeks or months, unless it's really high impact and value, it's probably not going to be a good way to start. Think about something small, something more discrete. So there you go. A range of considerations for you to think about as you build out and evaluate your own use cases with AI. Think about what at the top of all, at the higher view, what are the priority impacts? They're going to be, which use cases will have most value to the business. As you examine those, how do we interface with this simply, right, without making massive changes to existing processes or systems? What's it look like? For the end user, what's their impact going to be? Can we do that with minimal data, minimal integration to show value and proof before we build on that? Can we measure that really simply? What are the discrete subcomponents? Where can we look at? Pick one of those, but examine a couple, just so you can then make some further refinement and judgment calls. And then what's that investment look like in terms of effort and the license you need? And with that will set you up for success to then start building momentum with your AI journey. All the best.